Hi, I'm Karen and this is Jack, and we're here to show you how to install Pergo.
The revolutionary laminate floor from Sweden, the most durable, best-selling laminate floor on the market.
If you're a do-it-yourselfer who's comfortable with power tools and home improvement projects, you'll find Pergo easy to install.
However, if you're a novice at home projects, you may want to call a professional.
We've packed a lot of detailed how-to information in this tape to help you have the confidence to do a great job. And to make it easy to get the most from this tape, we've organized it into segments. Each segment is identified with a color, so you can fast forward past the parts you may not need for your installation.
Like the segment on installing Pergo on stairs, which you won't need if you won't be doing that.
We'll begin with the basics that everyone needs to know: site evaluation, planning the job, preparing the floor, and underlayments.
Next comes the Installation Basics segment, which applies to all types of Pergo flooring. You'll want to pay close attention to the instructions in this segment.
Following Installation Basics, there's a segment specific to installing Presto. And you'll need to watch the segment on finishing, moldings, and trim.
There are also segments with things you need to know for certain specific locations, such as bathrooms and kitchens, stairs and steps, and installing around pipes. We show you how to keep your Pergo floor looking beautiful for years in the care and maintenance segment.
No floor, not even Pergo, is totally indestructible. So the last two segments of the video show how to repair minor damage and how a damaged plank can be replaced. The last segment on plank replacement is intended for floor installation professionals.
In addition to the colors, you'll notice a time code in the corner of the screen. Using the reference on the video case, you can find a specific segment using the time code if you prefer.
Let's get started.
Okay. Before you install Pergo flooring, you need to evaluate the location to be sure it's appropriate for the product. The main thing to check for is that you are installing Pergo in a home where moisture won't be a problem.
You'll need plenty of drainage away from the house, whether it's pier and beam, slab, or basement construction.
For pier and beam construction, make sure the crawl space is vented and the vents aren't blocked. You'll also need to make sure there's a 6 mil or thicker plastic vapor barrier either covering the ground in the crawl space or attached to the underside of the floor. This is very important in keeping moisture from reaching the underside of your Pergo flooring.
This home is ideal because the downspouts are in place for channeling water away from the house. You may have a concrete subfloor, like this house, that sits directly on the ground. Concrete is such a porous material that moisture is constantly absorbed up through the slab. We'll show you later in the video how we install a plastic vapor barrier on top of the concrete to protect the floor.
The lot's also been graded to an acceptable slope of 1/2 inch per foot for at least 10 feet from the foundation.
On new construction, the concrete needs to cure for 60 days, so make sure you factor 2 months into your construction schedule before you install any floor.
The easiest way to plan your Pergo installation is to complete the floor calculator form that you can get at the Pergo website or take your measurements to your retailer.
You'll need to determine the floor area to be covered and the floor perimeter so you can calculate how much molding you'll need. If you're comfortable with metric measurements, you'll find a tape measure with metric figures very helpful. Each Pergo plank is 20 centimeters wide.
If the room is 14 feet and 9 inches across, that's 450 centimeters. To do the math, divide 20 centimeters, the width of one plank, into 450. If using English measurements, you'll need to divide 14 feet 9 inches by 7 7/8 inches to determine how many plank widths it'll take to cross the room.
The floor calculator will also help you determine what other materials and accessories you'll need.
You don't want to get into the project and run out of something.
At this stage in the planning, you also need to determine which trim and finishing components you'll need. For example, if your Pergo floor ends at an entrance, such as this one, that connects with a floor that will be carpeted, you'll need a carpet reducer strip. If there's a door threshold like this, you'll need a Pergo end molding. Take note of the trim and molding section of this tape to determine which finishing pieces you'll need. Now it's time to prepare the floor.
You need to make sure the subfloor or existing flooring is ready for Pergo. Naturally, any carpeting must be removed first.
One of the greatest things about Pergo is that it can be installed right over most flooring material, including ceramic tile, vinyl, and hardwood, and it can go over concrete or wood subflooring.
However, if you have an existing parquet or plank floor that is glued to a concrete subfloor, it must be removed before installing Pergo or the flooring will buckle. Also, Pergo can't be installed in rooms with floor drains.
And there are a few things you need to look for to make sure your existing floor is properly prepared. First, your subfloor has to be clean, dry, and sound, and you need to make sure the subfloor is flat. Now, most floors appear to be level, but there's a way to make sure it's flat enough for Pergo.
Fasten a nail into the floor at the middle of the room. Tie a string to the nail next to the floor. Stretch the string across the floor to the most distant wall, like this.
Move the string around the perimeter of the room and have a second person look under the string and mark those gaps that are greater than 3/16 of an inch. Also, the floor must not slope more than 1 inch in 6 feet. Check the entire floor area.
If you find the floor has more variation than that, you must correct it before installing Pergo. Here's how.
First, let's talk about what you need to consider if you have a concrete subfloor. If you've pulled up carpet and pad, make sure you remove all padding, uneven glue residues, and any lumps of material on the subfloor. If your concrete subfloor needs repair or is not flat, you'll need to grind down the high points or use a leveling compound, like one made with Portland cement. These leveling compounds use liquid latex or powdered latex mixed in the cement as a binder, so you get a good, hard, smooth, level surface. And make sure you give the patching material plenty of time to dry thoroughly, following the manufacturer's instructions. Whenever there's a concrete subfloor, even if it's covered with vinyl, linoleum, or tile, you must cover the subfloor with a layer of Pergo 6mm polyethylene film. This polyfilm forms a vapor barrier to keep moisture from reaching the underside of your Pergo flooring. What if you have hardwood over concrete? You do not install Pergo on top of wood that has a concrete subfloor. The wood has to be removed first. Then you use the polyfilm as a vapor barrier over the concrete. Now, to make sure there's not too much moisture in the subfloor, you should do a little test first. Check the moisture level by taping down a piece of polyfilm about 2 feet by 2 feet, or 1 square meter, in 2 or 3 spots. A rubber-backed mat will work too. And wait 72 hours. When you check back, if you see darker concrete under your cover, or if the plastic has become cloudy, or you see moisture or condensation, then you have a subfloor with an overly high moisture content. In this case, ask your retailer or call 1-800-33-PERGO for assistance.
Now let's talk about what you need to consider if you have a wood subfloor. If you've pulled up carpet and pad, make sure you remove all padding staples, uneven glue residues, and any lumps of material on the subfloor. Next, check for damage to the subfloor. Walk the floor carefully, checking for squeaks and uneven joints in the subfloor. To reduce or remove squeaks, re-nail the subfloor to the floor joists. For a wood subfloor that needs leveling, use a sander, or again, a self-leveling compound to correct the problem. Wood subflooring is treated differently than concrete subflooring. You should never put polyethylene film over wood or any other organic material. It can trap moisture and cause mold or mildew. Now let's make sure the door frames are ready. To do this, lay a loose plank upside down on top of the underlayment you'll be using, like I've done. Press down firmly, then saw off the bottom of the door frame and 1 inch of the wall base so there's enough room to slide the flooring underneath at least 1/4 inch. Remember to leave a concealed 1/4 inch expansion space under the casing and jamb as well.
Now we're ready to talk about the underlayment. Before you install a Pergo floor, you cover the subfloor with one of Pergo's underlayments, materials designed to reduce impact sound when the floor is walked on and increase walking comfort.
Pergo's newest top-of-the-line underlayment is Silent Step Premium Underlayment. Silent Step provides maximum walking comfort, significantly reduces impact sound, and ensures quick installation.
Pergo makes several quality underlayments available at your retailers.
Here's the first thing you need to know about installing any Pergo floor. You won't be gluing, nailing, or attaching Pergo to the subfloor in any way.
It's called a floating floor, which means it just sits on top of the subfloor. This makes it very easy to install, remove, or repair.
When you're installing any type of Pergo flooring, you need to allow the product to acclimate to the room's environment for 48 hours.
It's important to allow the material time to adjust to the normal room temperature and humidity before you install it. This helps ensure a good fit.
Pergo expands and contracts with changes in humidity. You will see how we allow for this expansion by leaving a 1/4 inch expansion space around the edge of the floor and anywhere else the floor meets a fixed object.
Since we're working in a kitchen, we'll need to apply sealant in certain expansion spaces where moisture is likely, in front of the cabinet with the sink, in front of the dishwasher, in the refrigerator space, and in front of any exterior doors. These little Pergo spacers are very handy. You use them to hold the space while you install the floor.
Okay, now before we get started, let's decide which direction the planks go. There's really not a right and wrong direction. It's just a matter of what looks best.
Generally, the flooring looks best if the planks are installed parallel to the incoming light. So the first thing to do is determine which direction light usually enters the room.
The exception to that rule is a narrow space, such as a hallway. There, you'd usually want to install Pergo lengthwise, regardless of the light source.
Since we have these large windows in the breakfast area letting light flood the room, we'll lay our planks in this direction. Are you ready to get started?
You bet. First, we need to use a polyethylene film as a moisture barrier because we're installing over a concrete subfloor. Spread it out, cut and fit it to the edge of the room. Overlap each strip at all seams by 8 inches or 20 centimeters, and be sure the film goes all the way to the edge of the floor.
Next comes the underlayment, Pergo's Silent Step. Unroll one width at a time. When you've installed planks up to the edge of the underlayment, unroll another width and butt the edges, loose-fitting the seams. Never overlap foam.
So that's it for underlayments. Now we'll demonstrate how to install Pergo planks.
Pergo Presto is a unique tongue and groove system to install laminate flooring without glue. Pergo Presto can be installed by inserting the tongue into the groove or sliding the groove under the tongue at an angle and then rotating the plank downward to lock the joint. We will demonstrate the installation method of inserting the tongue into the groove because this is the easier of the two methods.
In this illustration, you can see the tongue locked into the groove section of a plank. This second illustration shows the tongue inserted into the groove at an angle, then rotated downward to lock the joint. There are some situations where a plank cannot be raised and rotated. In these situations, you will use the special Pergo Presto tapping block, or when the plank is next to a wall, you can use the Pergo Presto pull bar.
Choose your starting wall. To begin, measure the width of the room and divide the measurement by the width of the plank, 7.5 inches, or, using metric figures, 192 millimeters. If you end up with a figure that includes a fraction of a plank that's less than 2 inches, or 50 millimeters, that means you'll need to reduce the width of the first row. This increases the width of the last row. First, unroll one width of underlayment.
You begin by assembling the first 2 rows away from the wall. You'll put them in place after they're assembled.
Start with 4 planks, placing them about 2 feet away from the starting wall. Place them so that the extended groove side faces into the room away from the wall and the tongue side is toward the wall. You need to saw off the tongue on the end of the first plank and along the length of all planks in the first row against the starting wall. Also, cut a plank down to 32 inches, or 800 millimeters, in length to begin the second row.
Work with your back toward the starting wall. Begin assembly by putting 2 spacers against the end wall and put the end of plank number 1 against the spacers. Now, with your back to the starting wall, place your knees on the starting plank and work from right to left. At a slight angle, insert the tongue of plank 2 into the groove of plank 1 until the laminate edges meet. Then press downward on plank 2. When the joints lock, you will hear a clicking sound as the joints fit together tightly.
When you do this, there shouldn't be any gaps at the joints. If there is a gap, rotate the joints and press downward until the joint locks and the 2 planks are fit together tightly. Place a weight, like a carton of Pergo Presto, over the ends of planks 1 and 2. Next, move so that your knees are on plank 1 and join the end of plank 3 to plank 1 by raising plank 3 slightly and inserting the tongue into the groove until the laminate edges meet. Then, rotate plank 3 downward until the joint locks, keeping the plank's ends perfectly aligned.
Again, face away from the starting wall with your knees on the first row of planks. Join the end of plank 4 to the end of plank 2. At this point, there will be a gap on the long joint between plank 3 and 4. To close this gap, place your right hand under the locked end joint and raise the planks upward about 1 inch. Maintain this angle as you take your left hand and press against the long edge of plank 4 until the laminate edges of plank 4 meet the laminate edges of plank 3. Then, while kneeling on planks 1 and 3, press downward on plank 4 until the long joint locks.
There shouldn't be any gaps at this point. If there's a gap, rotate the joints and press downward until the joint locks and the planks are fit together tightly. Use this installation method to complete these 2 rows all the way to the opposite end wall.
You'll probably need to cut the last plank in each row. Measure the space from the wall and deduct 1/4 inch before you cut to allow room for the expansion space. When your first 2 rows are assembled, slide them to the starting wall, placing spacers to maintain the 1/4 inch expansion space.
If you find the wall is uneven, scribe the contour of the wall, making a pencil line along the first row of planks. Then, disassemble them by raising the edge of the planks upward. Mark or place them so that you can reassemble them in the same order. Cut each plank along the line, reassemble, and place against the starting wall using spacers.
Keep a weight on the end of the rows you're assembling and build 1 row at a time, each time joining the plank at the short edge first, then along its long edge. Begin each row with a plank or plank section so that there are at least 8 inches between end joints from one row to the next. This 8-inch stagger between joints is very important to the strength of the floor. When there's not enough space to raise a plank at the end of a row, use the pull bar. Set the plank flat on the floor, align the tongue partially into the end joint, and tap on the pull bar until the end joint closes. Then use the tapping block against the groove side of the plank to close and lock the long joint.
When you get to the last row, place a full row of planks directly on top of the last installed row of planks. Now, use the full width of a scrap piece of plank. Cut off the extended groove flush with the laminate edge of the scrap piece of the plank. Place the tongue side of the scrap piece of plank against the wall. Insert the thick end of a spacer between the pencil and the cut groove edge, Then trace the contour of the wall.
Cut the planks along the line. Then assemble the last row by laying a plank flat on the underlayment. Use the pull bar and hammer to tap in the long joint. If the last row is wide enough, use the tapping block and hammer to tap in the end joint. If the last row is too narrow to use a tapping block, cut a scrap piece with tongue to fit the end joint of this last row. Fit the scrap into the end groove of the plank to be assembled, then use the pull bar and hammer to tap in the end joint.
When you've completed the last row, you just install your wall trim and flooring transitions, vacuum, and you'll be ready to enjoy your new Pergo Presto floor. Sooner or later, you're going to encounter some kind of obstacle in the floor. Pipes, stairs, toilet flanges, air vents, something you have to go around. This step isn't difficult, but you do have to move carefully. Let's look at working around a pipe. A pipe might be at the end of the plank. Cut the plank for the proper length to the wall, then position the cut end of the plank against the pipe and mark the pipe's center. Put a spacer at the wall and measure the distance from the spacer to the edge of the plank. Transfer that measurement from the center of the pipe to the plank. Measure from the adjacent plank to the center of the pipe, and use this measurement to find the center of the pipe on the plank. To maintain the necessary expansion space, drill a hole that's a ½ inch, or 14 millimeters, larger than the diameter of the pipe. Cut off the end of the plank across the center of the hole. Use plenty of glue to secure the plank and the end piece in place around the pipe. If the pipe falls along the long edge of the plank, measure from the adjacent plank to the center of the pipe and transfer that measurement to the plank. Again, put a spacer at the wall. Measure from the spacer to the center of the pipe. Transfer that measurement to the plank. The point where the two pencil marks cross is where the center of the pipe will fall. Drill a hole at this point that's a ½ inch, or 14 millimeters, larger than the diameter of the pipe. Draw two lines at a 45-degree angle away from the hole. Cut out the piece, slide the plank into position, and glue the plank and its piece into place. These techniques are used around anything that causes a break or opening in the floor. Toilet flanges, air vents, and screws that fasten a threshold or attach the foot of a bifold door to the floor. Always allow a 1/4 inch expansion space. Anytime Pergo meets the wall or a fixed object, you have to give it room to expand. That 1/4 inch gap is essential to a good installation.
Pergo makes a complete line of finishing moldings. The wall base and quarter round are color coordinated to beautifully finish out the room. Pergo also makes T-molding for transitions between two areas of Pergo flooring, reducer strips for transitions from Pergo to other flooring materials, end moldings for use against thresholds, ceramic tiles, sliding doors and bathtubs, and stair nosing for use on stairs and steps. All these laminate moldings are color coordinated to Pergo designs and are as durable as the floor itself. T-molding is used when two Pergo surfaces meet, like in a doorway or narrow archway that's no more than 4 feet wide. You center a T-molding in the middle of an archway, and in a doorway, center a T-molding under the space that the closed door occupies. To create the expansion space, we installed this 3/4 inch wood strip where the T-molding will go. Remove the spacers and the wood strip and secure a piece of metal track in the center open space. Fasten the metal track directly to the subfloor. Cut a strip of laminate T-molding. Check the track and be sure it is not bent anywhere. Lift the molding up at a slight angle. Working left to right, squeeze the molding into the track. Once it's fitted into the track, it cannot be removed without causing permanent damage.
When Pergo meets another floor surface that's lower than the Pergo surface, like vinyl, use one of the reducer strips. Leave a 2-inch space between the finished Pergo floor and the front edge of the hard surface reducer. Install the track a 1/4 inch from the edge of the finished Pergo flooring. Squeeze into the track from left to right. When using the carpet reducer, leave a 1.5 inch space between the finished Pergo floor and the front edge of the carpet reducer. Install the track a 1/4 inch from the edge of the finished Pergo flooring. Squeeze into the track from left to right. The carpet reducer goes in just like the T-molding strip. To finish it off, tuck the carpet between the carpet reducer and the tack strip. End moldings finish Pergo floors when they meet vertical thresholds like this exterior door, as well as sliding glass doors, tub or shower basins, raised hearths, or sills. Leave a 1/2 inch space between the Pergo floor and the vertical surface when using an end molding. Fasten with Pergo sealant or a 100% mildew-resistant silicone sealant. To cut a return to finish the end of a wall base or quarter round, just cut a 45-degree angle at the end of the molding. Then cut another 45-degree angle at the end of another piece of molding, just as if you were going around an outside corner. After you've cut off the second piece, adjust the miter saw so that you can make a 90-degree cut. Carefully cut the small piece at 90 degrees, like this. Then take the small piece, the return, and glue it with a dab of adhesive to the end of the molding and fasten the molding into place. Then we countersink the nail holes and fill the holes with finishing putty. Pergo Easy Cleanup and Moisture Resistance make it the perfect floor for the kitchen and bath.
Because these rooms have water sources, there's one extra thing you do to make sure moisture will not get beneath the floor surface. You fill some specific areas and specific expansion spaces with sealant.
Use Pergo sealant or 100% silicone sealant. It remains flexible and elastic, so the floor can still expand and contract. In bathrooms, you simply use the sealant to fill the expansion space around the perimeter of the room and around the flange of the toilet and any pipes. To fully seal around tubs and shower basins, use an end molding. Just pre-cut the end molding, fill the expansion space with sealant, and then press the end molding into place. Clean up the excess sealant with acetone.
In the kitchen, use sealant only in specific areas, such as around the dishwasher compartment, or in the front of it if the washer is already installed, and run a bead of sealant in the expansion space along the cabinet where the kitchen sink is located. Fill the expansion space around the refrigerator area and seal around any water supply line, such as for the ice maker, which may come up through the floor. You should also use sealant in the laundry room, filling in all expansion spaces. By the way, you should not install Pergo in any room with a floor drain.
As we mentioned in the segment on trim and moldings, you also use sealant to fasten end moldings at vertical thresholds like sliding glass doors and other exterior doors. This helps keep moisture from getting under the floor.
Steps and stairs are the only places you'll actually secure Pergo to a surface, in this case, the tread and riser. First, make sure the stairs are in good condition. Loose treads or risers need to be replaced or securely repaired. Clean the stairs thoroughly as well. Scrub up any loose paint, debris, or old adhesives.
Always install stairs from the top down. Today we're installing Pergo on stairs that do not have an extended nosing. In this case, we begin by attaching the riser of the next step.
To maintain the floating floor at the top of the stairs, use the Pergo stair nosings that allow the floating floor to slide right up underneath them. Like our other moldings, they conceal the 1/4-inch expansion space. Attach the stair nosing directly to the subfloor with construction adhesive. Mark the nosing where the screws will go, 2 inches from each end of the nosing, and then place additional screws approximately 8 inches apart in the remaining portion of the nosing. Drill the holes, use number 6 by 1 5/8 inch finishing screws, and countersink.
When pre-cutting planks for treads, add the thickness of the Pergo plank on the step edge to the depth of the tread. Then deduct 1 3/4 inches, or 44 millimeters, to allow for the stair nosing. The tread will require 2 planks. Squeeze 3 beads of quality construction adhesive along the length of the tread, applying the adhesive evenly. Glue the 2 Pergo pieces together at the tongue and groove using Pergo glue. Place the seam at the back of the tread. Then press firmly to seat the plank into the adhesive.
Spread the adhesive on the back of the Pergo plank cut for the riser. Then press firmly onto the riser, making a tight fit. Follow the same procedure to attach the stair nosing.
When you have an extended nosing, fasten a narrow strip of Pergo to the step edge.
Finish all the treads. Then fill the holes with color-coordinated Pergo finishing putty. Clean up with a damp cloth and avoid walking on the stairs for at least an hour.
Here's where Pergo really shines. Nothing could be easier to clean and keep beautiful. Just clean by sweeping. Or you can vacuum, but only use a hard surface attachment like this. Never use a vacuum with a beater bar.
It's easy to care for your Pergo floor. For spills and messes, just wipe with a damp cloth or use a damp cloth mop. You can also use Pergo cleaner, but do not use soap or detergent on Pergo, ever.
And don't use floor polish or cleaning wax or any of the things you're probably used to using on your floors.
They can actually bind dirt with the surface of your Pergo flooring. Just stick with water.
It's so simple, it's almost hard to believe. But for routine cleaning, just sweep and damp mop using very little water. Now, if you have a difficult spill,
Such as paint, India ink, or fingernail polish, like this,
don't panic. Just use denatured alcohol or a small amount of acetone on a cloth. Even these spots will come right out. Pergo is extremely scratch resistant, but any floor can be scratched. To protect your floor from scratching, place Pergo floor protectors under all furniture that sits on your Pergo floor, and place doormats at the inside of all exterior doors. Vacuum or dust mop regularly.
Pergo is a very beautiful and durable floor that's easy to install and maintain. A floor you'll enjoy for many years.
If you get some minor damage to your floor, you can easily repair it using Pergo finishing putty. It's color coordinated with Pergo designs. Here we have a chip in the floor. To repair it, we'll start by using a knife to make the edges of the damaged area straight. After the edges are straight, apply the finishing putty to the damaged area with a Pergo spacer or plastic putty knife. Smooth out the surface and don't trap air bubbles in the putty. Clean up the excess putty and haze around the repair with a damp cloth. The finishing putty will take about 72 hours to cure, and some shrinkage may occur. Apply a second coat if necessary. If the damage you're trying to repair is just too large to cover with finishing putty, say anything larger than 1/4 inch or 7 millimeters, contact a flooring professional to handle the repair. To locate an authorized Pergo repair specialist in your area, call 1-800-33-PERGO.
When you encounter damage that's just too large to repair with finishing putty, it's time to call in the professionals. Usually, that means replacing an entire plank, and since Pergo has no die lots, you'll get a perfect match. The floating floor design makes this easier than you'd think.
First, ask the customer to put several new planks in the room where the floor is damaged and let them remain there for at least 72 hours before the repair. This allows them to acclimate to the room temperature and humidity.
Now let's do a tool check. You'll need some standard tools: a circular saw, a permanent marker, measuring tape or ruler, vacuum, safety glasses, dust mask, a suction cup, utility knife, sandpaper block, sand bags, a pail, and cloths for cleanup. The materials you'll need are masking tape, Pergo glue, and of course, Presto planks. Now, we're going to take you through Presto plank replacement step by step. When you arrive, take one of the replacement planks and inspect it. Check to make sure it's the same size as the damaged plank. If it's not acclimated, it can be longer or shorter.
First, mark a rectangle 1 inch inward from the locked joints. Next, draw diagonal lines from each corner of the rectangle to each corner of the locked joints. Overlap a piece of tape by 1/8 inch from the joints onto the diagonal lines. The edge of the tape will be the stopping line for the saw blade. Adjust the saw blade to the thickness of the replacement plank. Cut the lines of the rectangle. Use a utility knife to complete each corner cut. Lift the rectangular piece with the knife and remove. Remember to keep the area well vacuumed to prevent debris from getting beneath the flooring or underlayment.
Use a saw to cut the diagonal at each corner and complete the cut using a utility knife. Grasp the 1 inch piece, rotate up and down, and gently pull the joint apart. Move one hand closer to a corner and rotate until the corner separates. Remove the 1 inch piece. Use the same movements to remove the remaining pieces.
Now it's time to prepare the replacement plank. Remove the tongue on the short and long side of the replacement plank with the utility knife. Mark, cut, and remove the underside of the groove at the other end of the plank.
After cutting, press downward with your thumbs and break off the underside of the groove. Use the utility knife to clean up the edge on the underside. Sand and smooth the cut edges at each end and along the length of the plank. Vacuum to prevent chips from getting under the floor.
It's time to dry fit the replacement plank. To do this, insert the groove of the replacement plank under the tongue in the opening and rotate downward, gently pressing the plank into place. Using your fingertips, check all the joints for smoothness.
Remove the plank with a suction cup. If any of the joints were raised, check for debris in the grooves and clean it out. Place a bead of Pergo glue in the grooves at each end and down the length of the opening. Insert the plank and press it into place gently. Clean up any glue on the surface with a damp cloth.
When you're done, check the joints of the replacement plank with your fingertips to assure they're smooth and even with each other. When you're satisfied that all joints are even and smooth, place sandbags or other weights on the just installed plank. Check the joints once more to assure that they are smooth and even. Leave the weights on the plank for 12 hours, then clean and remove any glue haze.
So, that's how it's done. If you have any questions about installing or repairing Pergo floors, visit the Pergo website at www.pergo.com or call 1-800-33-PERGO for expert answers.